Hello and welcome. Here are breaking stories from outside Africa. Now, the European Union has reached a landmark agreement to completely ban Russian gas imports by autumn 2027, nearly 4 years after Moscow launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. EU diplomats and lawmakers sealed the deal Tuesday night, setting earlier phase-out targets for liquefied natural gas and short-term contracts. Now, the bloc has also asked the European Union Commission to present a proposal early next year to end all Russian oil imports by 2027. While Russian oil has been under sanctions since 2022, Hungary and Slovakia, still reliant on Druzhba pipeline, secured limited concessions, allowing a possible extension to November 2027 if member states struggle to fill gas storage. EU Energy Commissioner Dan Jorgensen hailed the deal, saying that Europe is finally and for good turning off the tap on Russian gas, calling it a decisive step towards energy security and independence. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen described the agreement as a good day for Europe.
Our suppliers to trusted partner, signing new partnerships, and we invested in renewables and nuclear at unprecedented speed.
In the same vein, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has unveiled a 2-year €90 billion support package for Ukraine, saying the funding will ensure Kyiv can lead peace negotiations from a position of strength. Now, she told reporters that Brussels is proposing to cover 2/3 of Ukraine's financing through loans funded either by EU-level borrowing or the use of frozen Russian assets, an option strongly resisted by Belgium.
We overcame the worst energy crisis in decades. We saved energy together while ensuring energy security all the way. We diversified our suppliers to trusted partner, and we can equip them with the means to defend themselves and to lead peace negotiations from a position of strength. And since pressure is the only language the Kremlin responds to, we can also dial it up. We have to increase the costs of war for Putin's aggression, and today's proposal gives us the means to do this.
More than half of Iran's parliament has accused the judiciary of failing to enforce the country's compulsory hijab law as more women openly defy the dress code in major cities. Since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, women have been required to cover their hair and wear loose clothing in public. But increasing numbers, especially in Tehran, now appear without headscarves, prompting outrage from conservatives. Now, speaking at a women's event in Tehran, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, praised the hijab, insisting it does not hinder women's progress. His comments came a day after lawmakers criticized the judiciary for not taking stronger actions.
اگر چنانچه زن حجاب داشته باشه و این محدودیت‌ها رو برای خودش معین بکنه، از پیشرفت باز میمانه. جمهوری اسلامی این منطق غلط رو باطل کرد، زیر پا له کرد. در جمهوری اسلامی نشون داده شد که زن مسلمان و مقید، بانوی با حجاب و مقید به پوشش اسلامی، میتوانه در همه عرصه‌ها پیشرفته تر از دیگران حرکت بکنه. میتوانه نقش آفرین باشه، هم در جامعه هم در خانه.
Around the world, the fallout of military takeovers and political crises continues to challenge democratic governance and human rights. A recent example is Myanmar, where following a military coup, several high-profile political leaders and activists were granted asylum in neighboring countries. This situation highlights a global pattern nations stepping in diplomatically to protect political freedoms, uphold human rights, and prevent persecution. Tonight, we examine the implications of such asylum decisions, both for the countries granting refuge and for the nations experiencing political upheaval. Are these interventions effective in safeguarding democracy? Do they signal regional responsibility or political maneuvering? And what lessons can be drawn for Africa and other regions facing similar crises? Now, joining us to discuss this, we have Yemi Fajemisin. He is a geopolitical analyst in Glasgow, UK. Thank you, Yemi, for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me, Lashin. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Now, tell us, what motivates countries to grant asylum to political leaders and activists, following coups or even political crises?
Yeah, just for the benefit of the viewers, let me quickly give you a background on the Myanmar one. So there was a military coup takeover around February 2021 by the military junta in Myanmar. And that's led to civil war because there's been few resistant groups around the country, with China supporting some of them, China also working with the military junta. So things are a bit messy there. So back to your question on the asylum thing. I suppose it depends on few factors when it comes to in this context. We're talking about political asylum because asylum is quite a big word. So we're looking at business interest, relationship, and ideology comes into play into things like that. And the classic example we can look at as a case study will be the case of Syria when Assad regime fell. And we noticed that after the fall of the Assad regime, he fled to Russia. Russia kind of gave him protection straight away. And why did Russia do that? Russia kind of have their own vested interest during the war in Syria. So they were propping up the Assad regime. Russia had a bit of military base there as well. So there's a bit of the business interest for Russia in that region. So it became kind of normal after the fall of Assad for Assad to flee to Russia and get protection there with his family. So we're looking at different cocktail of things when it comes to reasons what motivates countries to grant asylum. It could be business interest. It could be simply of ideology. It could be countries just wanting another country not to fall into the hands of the pro-democratic world. So different things come into play in that context.
Okay, but then how do these asylum decisions influence the stability and future of the affected country?
Yeah, it does in a way. The influence could be good or bad. Again, it comes to the situation where the countries giving the asylum have any vested interest in the political asylum they're offering the other country. So let's look at another case study, for example. We know around the 1979, the founder of Islamic revolution in Iran, which is Khomeini, so again, had political asylum in France. And while he was there, he was using the Western media to galvanize his support base and to propagate his own message. So after the fall of the Iranian Shah, he was able to return to Iran into a hero's welcome. So when it comes to stability there, I suppose it depends on context of the situation. If you're looking at a country persecuting another political leader, it could lead to a good thing and it could lead to a bad thing as well. So I suppose it depends on the context of the reality on ground.
All right. Now, Yemi, but can granting asylum act as a deterrent, against political persecution, or does it risk prolonging the conflict?
It does. I would say if you're looking at an autocratic regime, for example, because what most people want to see is to protect the human rights. And if you're looking at an autocratic regime, and it does complicate things. Let's look at another case study, another example. In Nigeria, in Africa, when we had the Abacha regime from 1993, I believe, to 1998, it was an autocratic regime persecuting people. And a lot of people fled Nigeria then to Europe. The current Nigerian president we have now also fled Nigeria. And he was living in the Western world during that time. So, yeah, it does really help in terms of human rights, the granting of political asylum. On the other hand as well, you could argue that political asylum is being given to very controversial people. But in the context of it all, I think it just it protects people from being persecuted on a general scale. Because the asylum principle itself was a UN convention that was generated around 1951. And that was generated because countries don't want to be sending back fugitives to Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin for the fear of being persecuted. So the genesis of the convention itself talks about protecting people on a general scale.
So, but then, what about global responses to political crises, like those in Myanmar? How do they compare to Africa's experience with coups and political upheavals?
Yeah, there's some similarities there, and there's not so similarities there as well. If you look at the Myanmar one, there's a coup that's happened there. There's few coups in Africa as well. Sadly, the Myanmar one has been underreported. And why has it been underreported? I think it's because of what's been going on in Gaza and Ukraine. So the world is largely not paid too much attention to what's going on in Myanmar. But in terms of the differences there, in case of Myanmar, we're beginning to see a civil war now where there's a group of resistance actually fighting each other and actually fighting the junta as well. And in Africa, we've not seen that as of yet. We've seen coups, but we've not seen some of these things leading to civil war. So that's the difference there. But similarities, I would say, is in the context of these things have not been reported enough and by the international community and the media at large. And I suspect it's because of the recent events in Ukraine and Gaza is taking much of coverage.
All right, now one more before we wrap up, Yemi. What responsibilities do regional and international organizations have, in protecting democracy and human rights in such scenarios? And also, are there risks for countries granting asylum in terms of diplomatic relations, security, or even political backlash?
Yeah, I think in terms of the responsibility for international communities, there's quite a lot, because the main thing for international communities, they want to, in the case of autocratic regime committing war crimes and all that, you want to make sure there's a ceasefire in place. You want to facilitate a return to democracy. So you also have this cocktail of things where you have vested interest. And for example, look at the case of Myanmar, for example. China has been really active in Myanmar. And why is China being active? China is trying to protect their own interest. China doesn't want Myanmar to fall into the pro-democratic Western sphere. So they want to keep Myanmar in confines of their sphere and control. So at the same time, you also have the Western world paying a bit of attention there, but not too much. The US under President Trump has been disengaging in that region, which is giving China a bit of influence there. So there's this case of countries, superpowers, using these things as a pawn to gain influence. So the responsibility there, it can be a bit dicey there. But the main thing is you want to prevent death. You want to facilitate a return to democracy. That's the main thing international community always strive to achieve in situations like this.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for speaking so in-depthly on this. Yemi Fajemisin, he's a geopolitics analyst in the UK. Thank you.